In the last vignette, we saw the sources of Catholic faith, and this is divine revelation. We have the teachings of Christ, which has been divinely revealed to us, and the interpretation of this teaching also divinely revealed. It is precisely because these teachings are divinely revealed that it was put together and collected by the great saints of the Catholic Church, commonly called the Fathers of the Church. Now, they have collected all these truths, both the truths and the interpretation, and now the Catholic Church has a problem. Who will preserve and transmit this to the Catholic Church until the end of time? If you give this responsibility to a group of bishops, they would surely end up quarreling. And in fact, even the year 100, they were already quarreling with regards to the contents and interpretations of the teaching of Christ. Well, of course, Christ knew this very well, and so he established an office with the primary role of preserving and transmitting divine revelation without adding or subtracting from it. Now, this responsibility was given to an office, and he made sure that this office is occupied by one person at a time through the history of the Church. And this office is referred to as the office of the Holy Father. It is at this point that Jesus Christ decided to establish one office. This office is meant to embody and contain all the divine revelations, and without adding to it or subtracting from it, this office is supposed to give all generations of future Christians the totality of the teachings of Christ. Christ knew very well that he could not give this office to all the apostles, because in the future, when the apostles have died, some future bishops might quarrel among themselves. And so he only prepared one person to head that office, and this person was Saint Peter. In all the life of Saint Peter, you will notice Christ preparing him for this office. He was in fact the weakest among the apostles, but it is God's way that he always chooses the weakest and the one who is lowest to do the great works for him. And so Jesus Christ called Peter and began his training to occupy this very important post. Christ says, "You are Peter, and upon this position, upon this role, upon this rock, I will build my church." In the last vignette, we showed you that there is a difference between Peter and the rock. Peter was not the rock. It was the office, the position, the papacy, what was called the rock or the stone. And the whole Catholic Church, Christ says, would be built on the rock. And so the whole Catholic Church has its foundation stone, the office of the Pope. Sort of remove the Pope and the whole Catholic Church would collapse. And so you see how important this office is, because this office is the only office that can sustain and maintain the tradition of the divine revelation that Christ has given us and given to the future members of the Catholic Church. And then Christ adds, and the gates of hell will not prevail against Peter, of course not, will not prevail against the office of the Pope. Now, as you will notice, as Christ was establishing this very important office called Rock, of which the gates of hell cannot prevail, he was only addressing one person, and that is Saint Peter. The apostles are not the rock. Only the office of Saint Peter was going to be the rock. The Catholic Church is not built on the apostles. It is built on the rock, the office that Saint Peter was going to assume. After making this important declaration about the papacy, Christ begins to give this office, not Peter, I repeat, but this office, another power. He said, I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now notice that the keys were given only to Peter and not to all the apostles. The apostles, the bishops, the priests were going to absolve sins. If they find that the person is repentant, they can, of course, absolve. But the keys, now that's different from absolution. The keys were only given to Peter. Now this is such a powerful thing to have the keys, because Christ called himself the door, but the keys were given to Peter. And so sometimes many Christians would say, well, Christ is the door, and therefore enter through the door, and they would like to enter through the door on their own merits, on their own efforts, forgetting the fact that someone was given the key. Now, this key was not given to bishops and priests. It alone resides in the office of the Pope. Was this power of the key given to Peter as a person, or was it given to his office as the first Pope? Well, obviously, it was not given to his person, because the moment he died, then the power of the keys would be gone. It was given to the office. And so anybody who sits in the office of the rock will have those keys. Now, this keys is the formula on how to enter the kingdom of heaven. And since the Pope alone is the one assigned by Christ as rock, he alone can preserve this, and therefore he alone knows the completeness of the way to heaven. And therefore we can say that he alone has the keys to the kingdom of heaven. If you ask people all around the world who among them have these keys, no one will claim that he has it. And yet this is what makes the Pope the most powerful person in the whole world. During the 1300s, the Christian world, Europe, knew about this, and so they all subordinated themselves under the Pope. Imagine, if the Pope alone has the key to the kingdom of heaven, whether you are a king or a queen, rich or poor, whether you are this race or that race, a president or a congressman or a senator, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless the Pope opens it for you. And so what the Pope does is he looks at you first of all, and then tries to make you worthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. That is the key. He makes you worthy by teaching you the formula, or what we call the Catholic faith. And if the Pope sees that you have this Catholic faith, that you have made yourself worthy to enter the kingdom of heaven, then he will use his key to open the door. In the last two vignettes, we have seen that St. Peter was a man that could not be trusted. He yielded like a jellyfish before a servant girl who was jeering at him. He denied the door, Christ, 3 times, and yet he was given the keys to the door. Every man, every Christian, whether he's king, president, or the lowliest of men, if they want to enter the kingdom of heaven, have to pass through him, because he alone has the key to eternal life. Christ built the church on the rock. The rock is an office of which St. Peter was the first person to sit on it. He gave this office so many powers, one of which is the keys to the kingdom. And today, the holder of these keys is the one who sits in Rome, Pope John Paul II. God bless you.